Okay, so I've got my plans and sections there, you can see, all set out in the one file. And I've started to create some of the more detailed drawings. Like you can see there, I've started to set out some of the joinery drawings. A bit of work to go on those still. But what I'll go through now is how you can set out some details from the proposed floor plan. And so that you can see, I've got the proposed wall there that will be cut through in a section. And so coming across all the way here, I've got the existing section. And so I want to leave that alone and copy it. So I'm going to leave that there, but then copy it to a place that's convenient to work. And it's getting a bit difficult because everything's tight together. So I'll turn ortho on, so it comes across in a straight line. And so possibly I'll need to just place it in between those proposed floor plans, which I've got for different things. And then maybe I'll just tidy this up a little bit to make it a bit neater, so I'll just trim those lines back. Just clean it up. There we go. Okay, so this is a rotated plan. Okay, so I'm going to have to still project off this one. So there you can see I've got again the section line going through those walls, and now I will switch to my wall layer, which is, going back up here, a wall stud PB, and then I can project some lines from the intersection of the section line and the wall, coming across to my section, and make it perpendicular to the floor. So one thing I've noticed, actually, a lot of people don't leave that perpendicular snap on, but in Object Snap there, again, someone else who has used this computer has done the same thing. If you want to see the snaps that I generally have on, and I've done this for 20 years, I always keep the same ones. Endpoint, midpoint, center, node, quadrant, intersection. I generally have extension turned off, but then insertion, perpendicular, and that's it. The rest I just find get in the way. So I only turn the others on if I need them. So that's a good basic setup. So now you'll see it'll come perpendicular to that line of the floor. And remember, your floor lining should generally go inside the walls. So I'm taking it down to the concrete, because that's what the stud should be attached to, or the bottom plate of the wall. It is possible to build wall framing on top of floor lining, so it is possible to have a floor in a space like this that is lined completely, so the whole space could be lined with timber flooring, and you can still put the bottom plate onto the floor lining, but it's not the best way of building. Much better to put the bottom plate onto the floor structure. So that's how I'm going to draw it. And so then I'll draw another line, again from my intersection of the section line and the wall. So it's important to just get this wall set up first before going too far with the detail. And then we can see a few interesting things, like the fact that it doesn't line up all that well with the beam. Not such an issue though, because we're going to have a flat ceiling all the way through the space, so we don't really need to get that lined up. But if we're going to keep a coffered ceiling or some sort of bulkhead there, then that would be an issue. So having done that though, I can then maybe leave that at that point and trim the line. So I'm just going to trim this very quickly to the ceiling, because we're going to have it with the wall fixed to our ceiling, which is not always going to be the case. So I'm just doing this to make it a bit easier for you. In fact, if I was building this myself, I would be looking at having a different system. I would be having the one that was on the next page here, where you would have the wall built first, and then you would come back and build the ceilings inside the walls. That's actually the more typical approach for a space like this. But there's no right or wrong there. There are reasons for doing it in either way, but for this space, I think either method probably would be okay, but you know, there are reasons I would do it like this. But again, I think if you use that system, it'll be fine, and definitely much easier to draw and just think about the construction. So I know where my wall is at least, and I know how wide I was planning on having it, but at this point we could also look at the requirements for the wall thickness. So measuring that, it must be, I'm sure, oh no, it's 140, what have I done there? Okay, I was obviously, oh yeah, no, there is a reason for that. Okay, that's right. So I've taken my section off this wall, and that is the one that's got the sliding door panel in it. That's why I've made it extra thick. So you'd have to have offset studs for that, and that would be a really beneficial thing as well, because it gives you more sound insulation between the living space and the bedroom. So that would be really good, but does it make sense to me for me to do the detail there? Probably not. So what I would do is say, right, we're not going to take the detail from there. I'll just quickly put a section reference, and we'll come back to referencing details later, but even here, just with that, that's enough to show a detail reference. And so then, this wall, should have measured the wall to start with, sorry, but this wall is 90, that's better. Okay, so 90 is more typical for interior stud framed walls. So that means with 10mm lining either side, we're going to have a 70mm stud, and that's fairly typical. So then I will project off the other way, and I've got another section going that way already there, so that's what I'll use. And so projecting lines again going this way for my wall, and again that'll give me the starting point for my detail. So remember, we're going to change this to a flat ceiling, so I'm only going to take it up to the line there of this ceiling, and then draw another one on the other side, or alternatively copy the line I have just drawn. It's probably a bit easier. The other side. Right, and there we are, and then trim it back to the floor structure, and now I can trim the floor lining to those wall lines, and then finally get back onto the ceiling. And so, again, when you start doing your detailing and thinking about essentially the design features you want, you do need to think about the process a little bit, because if you wanted to have a cornice, it would definitely be worth drawing most of that in your main section and then just copying the section or part of it to get the extra detail. Here, because it's a shadow line, we don't really need much detail for that to be shown in the section. All I want maybe is this rebate, and then the rest of it I'll draw when I copy it over. So I'm not going to look up the size of all of these different pieces, but in fact, maybe to make it easier to draw it though, I'll show you a quick way you can put this into AutoCAD. To trace it, in the old days I would have just eyeballed it, but you're lucky you've got things like the Snipping Tool you can just quickly use to grab the part you want on the screen, save it as a JPEG, and if you like I'll save a copy of this onto the P drive for you, and we'll call that also I'll put it into construction resources, and we'll just call that wall ceiling gyprock shadow line. And so then back into AutoCAD. Now I can insert, and again you choose that attach option just like you do for XFX to insert an image. It's the same button, and then down here you just need to make sure it's got all image files, and you can then go and choose that, that file that's been saved. And so here I'm just going to make sure insertion point's ticked, and scale, I'll show you what I do. I'm going to turn that off and set the scale to, sometimes you just got to guess, I'm going to say 10, and then place that nearby that'll do. It's obviously too big. Now, having done that, well, I see, yeah, it's too big, so I'll reinsert it. Sometimes you don't know until you've done it. So I'll go and reinsert that, and this time I'll leave the scale on 1. It depends on the image. Some you've got to make 1,000. It's just as a starting point to give us a point that I can then use to scale. And what do you know? That's amazing. How is it the right size? Almost. That's just total fluke. But what I wanted to show you is how to resize it to make it exactly the right size. So to do that, I'm going to go to the scale tool. Oops. Scale tool. Select the image. Enter. Pick the base point. Well, the base point can actually be anywhere. It doesn't really matter. We're going to move it anyway. So I'll make the base point here just so that it's clear. The place you choose for the base point doesn't really make a difference in this case. The important thing is that you choose the reference option and then click 2 points for your reference. And I'm zooming in so that you can see the points I'm clicking are in the centre of these lines on the corner of my plasterboard. There and there. And then the new length, I'm going to click the points option and click on the 2 sides of the wall that I've already projected in my section. So now the width of this wall in my drawing, in my image, should match exactly, you'll see when I move it, exactly with what I've drawn. There we are. This makes it a bit easier to draw if I can trace this. So now I'm going to move that all down by finding the bottom of my ceiling lining, which is right here. Oh, now why have I not got the... It's a bit odd. Anyhow, I'll just go with it. Don't know what that is. But anyhow, so I'm just going to choose the bottom of that lining and then come down and click on my ceiling. So then finally, to make it easy for me to draw lines over this and see what I've already got, again select the image and then right click and go to draw order and center back, and that puts it under all of my line work. And so then all I'm going to draw here is a line from the plasterboard. I'm not going to try and be too accurate here. The builders are not going to measure off this drawing to build it, so I'm just going to draw it from the side there and come across to locate the top of the plasterboard. And I might just measure to see what this drawing is. Yeah, it should be 10 mil, perfect. Now, if you specify 13 mil plasterboard, you probably should draw it 13 mil, but no one will really notice if it's 10 mil in your drawing and you specify 13 mil. So that's what I'm going to do, just to make the drawing a bit easier. So I'm going to offset 10 mil from either side of the plasterboard inwards, and then I can tidy this line up like that and copy it across to the other side, and then fill it. Just make sure it's a 0 radius. Yep, it is. And join these lines together. So very simple, nothing too complicated there. And at most you would then maybe think about putting the circle in, and because I'm fussy, I'll make it centered. So to do that, an option would be to, well, just draw a line and make sure it goes between your 2 sides of your stud wall, and get it in position, and then you can draw a circle from the midpoint of that line, and just by eye get it to line up with this. You don't need to make that exactly the right size. That's enough for the section. So then you need to use a detail, and again, so rather than having that all that detail messing up your section, it's better to then copy all of this to the side. So I'll just copy that maybe even up above, place I can put it. And I'll get rid of this image now so I can just see what I need there. I'll maybe have to come back and look at that, so I'll do this right now. I'll offset that line. And I've given you my little spiel about the thickness you should make plasterboard for your ceiling. Remember what thickness for ceilings, ceiling lining? No, I haven't given you my spiel. Oh, okay. It's a bit of a thing that I use to tell when people have actually built stuff that they've designed. When they tell you that it should be 13 mil, it tells me, if they say that they maybe haven't done much practical building work, because in a lot of the specifications it will say 13 mil still. So it tells you they've at least looked up the specifications. But if you're on a real building site, you will see that they don't really use that much. They tend to use a product that is made just for ceiling linings called Super Seal. That's the Chiplock one. Bowl have their own one, and it's 10 mil, and it's a special type of toughened plasterboard that is made for ceilings. And so it's better than the 13 mil for ceilings. So I'm going to offset 10 mil. And I'm a bit obsessive about that, but it's because, again, I've seen it on site so many times. So going back to the detail, so you can see there they've got the plasterboard lining running all the way across, and they're just putting the studs into that, which is a nice, easy construction. You could have the stud coming up to the furring channel. Suspended T-lock. So I'm going to make sure this is right, because this... So, yeah, we're going to have to mix these details a bit. So this is really what I want, where the plasterboard lining goes across the top of the stud. So that's your top plate, which is just another stud profile. But I want the shadow line still. So just mixing these two details a little bit. Okay, and so I might even get a clip of that one and show yourself that in a second. But anyhow, so now I can offset, well, I've offset 10 mil, so I'll put both of those. I know we've got a wall stud, but I don't have a ceiling, I'm sure. Well, I've got a ceiling layer, so what you would do there is say, right, that's the layer that's been used for the ceiling so far, but that may as well be the layer for the ceiling plasterboard. PB. It's got the right line weight already, so those lines can then go off that layer. So for now, that's enough for the section, and then in the detail, basically just need to have the same when I do get onto the ceiling, but I want to do the shadow lines first, and then we're going to change that image out for for the one with the furring channel. How are we going to time? Yep, that's all right. So this image is mainly to get that shadow line profile drawn, and because it's basically the same material as the wall stud, it's steel, so I'm going to use that layer, and that's fine. I don't need to make another layer for it. And so with the line tool, you don't really need to draw the thickness of the shadow profile. Just one line will do. But actually, because it's, so it should be a heavier line weight, so I will make a layer for it. So here I've got a wall stud metal already selected, so I'm going to make a new layer and make this a wall mould, maybe? Yeah, mould metal. And just beef up the line weight a bit. So 0.5 should be enough, maybe even make it a bit thicker than that if it's not enough. And here again, just eyeballing it, so tracing over these lines, sorry, on the one layer. There we are. Still a bit light in this view, but we don't know if that's how it'll print because I'm drawing in the Mod tab. So what I might show you there is that if I switch over to my details page, where I've got a few other details there, I can draw in one of these viewports now, and that's something I always like to do when I'm working on details, or in fact a lot of the drawings once I get right into it, because you can see the final printed line weight. So I'm going to get my detail in that viewport and then change the scale to 1 to 5, which should work pretty well for this detail. Lock my viewport again, and now when I zoom in and look at it, this is how it's going to print. Right, so you can see how I can tell straight away that line weight I've actually gone a bit overboard. 0.5 is too much. And this is why again I keep saying there's no rule for line weights, you've got to use judgment because they change depending on your scale. So 0.5, yep, just too much here, so maybe got to go back to 0.35. Still too much. Well, I do want to keep it at 0.35, so then what you'll probably do is cheat a little bit and bring these out, and again, these drawings are not true to life. It's not the way they'll build it. No builder is going to get up there and measure 1/4 of a millimetre, which is sort of at the level of detail we're looking at. If you measure these distances, let's see, it's, well, okay, it's a couple of millimetres, but they're not going to measure that. They just put it in there and make it fit. So you just want a gap to show that these are two different lines. Otherwise it's just a big blob of ink when you print it and no one can tell what it is. So that's it. And again, notice it's no problem zooming in and out here. It's not affecting the viewport because, again, most importantly, I've locked the view, locked the scale. Okay, so then coming back and drawing some more lines. Again, just tracing, because you're not designing the profile. It's made in the factory, and it's going to be the way it is, regardless of how you draw it. And now my arc, and it's a nice chance to look at some of these different arc options. No, actually I'll show you a better way. These will work, but an even better way is just to draw a circle with 2 points. Because then you can just click on the top, on the end point, and then the bottom on the end point. Bit hard to see on my line work there, so I'll turn line work off. Again, someone's messed with my toolbars, so I'll just turn the line weight button on again, so I can turn that off. And that just makes it easier to trim now using the line at the top and the bottom. And there we are. So now I'll turn the line weight back on, and that's okay. Maybe I could even just use stretch to bring that in, and I'm being fussy here, but definitely would make it look a little bit better just to bring that in slightly. And then maybe even the circle, or the arc, bring that in as well. Again, I'm getting too fussy, but that'll do it. So that can then be mirrored over to the other side, and a nice little trick I can show you there, because there's no centre of this wall. Oh yes, there is, sorry, there's a circle. We centred it already. So I was going to show you, I could draw a line in there just to work out the midpoint, but the circle's there to do that. So selecting left to right, and getting all those lines from the shadow mould, but then I'll deselect that little line at the top of the plasterboard, and then mirror using the mid or the quadrant or the centre of the circle, any of those points, and a vertical line above or below, doesn't matter which way you go, and enter to keep the original. So I've got my most important elements from that image, and then I might even put that onto a layer rather than deleting it. So I tend to have several layers for images, so I can have them on and off in different combinations, but not in this file, so I'll just make a new one quickly for image 1, I'll call it. No, so I don't want to make it current. Okay, so then I'll select the image, just to remind you if you haven't done that for a After you select it, you've got to go back to the Home tab, and then from the Layer panel, choose the layer you want to change it to. We can see because the border's changed colour, it is on that new layer. And now I can go and either turn that layer off or freeze it. Let's freeze it. And then I'll get another clip from my good old Chippendale catalogue, so I don't have to bother working out how to draw these fairing channels. And the crossrail, again, best friend the Snipping Tool. We use that to get this part, and use the same process to insert that. So again, helps to with AutoCAD save it, and so this is suspended. Yep, so suspended. So then I can just insert this exactly the same way. I might change this time to the image layer that I already had before, and insert a new one. And so we know the scale should be pretty close, but definitely won't be, well, you never know. That looks pretty good. That is total float. But let me see, is it going to line up? No, not quite. Okay, so it's a good chance to quickly see the scale tool in action again. So with it selected, scale, base point can be anywhere, but I'll do it this time. I will put it here just so you can see it will make it a little bit better because I don't have to move it as much. And so it should be giving me an option now. It's being painful. Oh, okay, it's because I'm... no, that's right, I don't know why it's not giving you the option. Scale, there. I don't know, I think it's because the viewport's locked, that's what the warning is telling me. Oh yeah, it's just giving you a warning. So you've got this extremely small scale factor thing, which also happens in Revit, unfortunately, just got to work around that. So I'll go back to my model tab just to scale it. Just one of those things. So scaling now. Oh, don't freeze, please. Yep, scale, I better say. Scale, and third time lucky, so here. Ah, still getting that message. Anyhow, when I right click, that's a total float. I don't know how it did that. It must have kept the same scale factor. That's a fluke. How's it done that? Oh no, this is my old image. What am I doing? Sorry. I've inserted the wrong image anyway. I'm being really stupid. Okay, so it's the suspended one. Don't know what I'm doing there. Yeah. Okay, so that's better. And it's miles off, so that's good in a way because then I can scale it. What's it going to? So I'm just trying to move it, and you can see it's snapping to things that I don't want it to, but I'll just click below it and then move it across, and yeah. Just so I can see, so you can see that when I do scale this time, I'll pick a base point on that intersection, and then at least it'll be pretty close to the right position. Yeah, so it's being difficult. It's not letting me see the options, but if I click on the up arrow there, I can see that it does have the copy and reference options. So the secret then, if you want to get those options, and you can't pick them from the menu, you can still type the first letter, usually. It's the capitalised one technically, but generally the first letter, which is R, then enter, and it still works. That's giving me the reference option now, and I'm going to pick the 2 points either side on my image, and then use the points option to pick the 2 sides of my drawn stud wall. So you can see now that lines up perfectly. And all I need to do now is move that, making sure I'm in the right place yet, move that down so that again, the bottom of my ceiling lining, and I'm sorry, I can't help it, I'm going to have to show you an option that we used to use in AutoCAD, gosh, so long ago, 25 years ago, that for some reason they've changed, but here it is a good thing to bring back. So to get it, I'm going to right click on the options, on the command line to get the options option there. Choose options, and if you haven't seen this before, this is the main preferences part of AutoCAD. So you've got all these tabs for your main preferences. On the display tab, you'll see you've got this crosshair size. I'm going to drag that all the way up to 100. This is the way AutoCAD used to come out of the box. So if I click OK, you're going to see I get a crosshair that goes all the way across the screen, which is actually a really helpful thing because it makes it much easier to line things up. So now I can select my image, move it, and it's easy for me to line that up at the bottom of my ceiling in the drawing, and then simply bring that down to snap to my line that I've drawn for my ceiling. And then again, I'm going to send that to the back again. And so now I can simply trace. It's mostly that furring channel that I need to trace. I'm also going to offset though to get my ceiling lining to be 10 mil. See, that's the size they've drawn it. And then draw lines, and I'm going to use the same line that I used for the metal mould in my wall. Oh no, I'll do the right thing. I'll do it with the ceiling. Sorry, so I've got a ceiling PB layer, and I will make a new layer. Yeah, let's do it right. So a ceiling metal is enough. We're going to use this for, so metal, and I'm going to put cut, because we're going to have one that's in projection that isn't cut. So then I'm just going to draw lines. So I forgot to check the line weight there. So that's 0.4. So that's good. And then I'll draw a line from the outline of that furring channel, like that, and coming across. And I'll mirror that. Oh no, so I'll mirror it in a moment. And so there's a little curving bit that comes up at the top. And we should really draw the flange, I suppose, but no, don't worry about that. Just draw the channel part, which is what I'm doing. So here again, I'll do circle 2 point, then go from there, come up. That'll do. And I won't show you how to break a circle. There is a way of breaking a circle, but instead what I'll do is just draw another line, a temporary line from the top, and then I can trim it. Much easier. And then get rid of that line. That's enough for the top of your furring channel. Don't worry about this part that comes down. It is a thing that's there, but it's actually a small little bit that wraps around the top, so don't worry about that. So I'll just draw this and then mirror that on the midpoint here. That's good enough. Just have to fill it the other side. Now it'd be nice if those were rounded. I don't think you'd see it, so I'm going to leave them straight. But then the thing you should have is a little recess here. That's the important thing. So I'm going to draw an arc. Don't need to be too precious about this, as long as we show that there's a curve where it comes down and then back up. And here it's a good chance to show you how to get it to go onto a line without snapping. And I've shown you a lot of this individually, but I just want to go over it. It's snapping to perpendicular, or if I move across more, I'm sure it'll find the midpoint. But I don't want any of those things. I just want to click on the line where I want to click on it. And so to force it to do that, you can either turn nearest on in your object snap settings, or type NEA for nearest, enter, and then you can just pick a point on the line and it will snap to it. So that's a really helpful thing. So now I'll mirror that little arc. Oops, too quick. So do that again. So mirror from the midpoint there but I'm going to turn ortho back on to get a vertical line without having to snap to anything else. There we are. And then fillet. Oops. Oh, sorry, I cancelled it. That was clever. So do that again. Midpoint. Click above. Enter. There we are. And then fillet. We'll join these lines together. So that's enough for the furring channel. That clearly reads. Anyone who knows what they look like and who's built them will know that looks. So that is. The track is much easier because we're seeing it side on. So I'm simply going to draw, or make another layer. So that ceiling metal cut that I made before, now it's going to be a ceiling metal projection. So I'm getting fussy, but caps. And then the line weight for this would be much lighter, so not as light as possible because we're in a detail. We can make the lines a bit heavier than normal, but 0.15 maybe is good, or even 0.18. So I'll draw a line coming across there. Don't need to be too precise about this. And then it's there, so I'll then copy that just by eye. You can find out the measurement for your top bar, but I'm not going to bother. Just putting a few lines in there to show that it's in profile, so that it's in elevation. That's enough. And so then the very last thing is the screw, and maybe, yeah, I'll make yet another layer for that. And I'm not going to bother making a different layer for my ceilings and wall fixings. I'm just going to use one layer called A fixing, or fixings, and make it have a center line style. So it'll be either center or center 2 depending on the size you want, but I think center 2 is going to be the right size for this. And then the line weight would be medium to heavy. So I'll try 0.35 and see how that looks at scale. Make that the current layer. Maybe I'll make this a different colour so it stands out a bit more. And I'll draw a line where the screw goes. And we can't really tell if that's right because we don't know, or the scale doesn't show very clearly here, especially for details and things. So now I'll go back to my sheet and we can confirm things like the line type. So there, I'll just test that it is working. Yeah, it is working, but at this scale, that line type is still too big. So I'll have to go back and try an even smaller version. So center 2, still too big. That's the smaller version of center. So there is, oh no, sorry, there's no smaller version of center, of course, unless, no, don't worry about that. So I'll stick with center 2. So another way of making that smaller, rather than using a different line style, is to go into properties for that line and change the line type scale. And so I just have to think about this. Is it going to be that way or is it the other way? So I think it's the other way. So it's late in the day and my brain isn't working properly. That's the other way. 0.1. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so it's going to be about 0.2. I had it right the first time, but I don't know why I didn't see it. Yeah, we can see the dash there. Maybe that could be a bit longer to make it a bit clearer. And, okay, so it's all getting a bit hard to look at. The image there is getting in the way. But maybe I'll just copy the track and the fixing line across. There's still a bit, sorry, that's just a bit messy, make that a bit shorter. Yep, so I'll copy them across. And then I can finally turn the image off and that's pretty much the detail done. Okay, so I've got my image on the image layer, but I'm going to change it now to the image 1 layer, which is frozen, and it will disappear and tell me It's done that, and there we are. So that's enough for your ceiling detail, except for the notes. So just copy the notes from the two-pot catalogue, and that's enough. Just try and label all the things in the drawing, and that should give you a good detail.